Okay, so welcome everyone to the edition of Ask the Author for Storyteller Tactics. What I'm going to do is ask you very quickly just to go around and say who you are, but also what sort of stories you're interested in getting some help with now. Ursula, we'd like to go first.
My name is Ercilia. I'm a complementary therapist and I also teach therapies. I'm currently building the website for the academy, and on the website, I'm aware that I need testimonials from clients and students to reflect the benefits of the new therapy that I'm introducing to the market. So it's not very well known. It's not like, did Reiki help you? Everybody knows Reiki. Not everybody knows Pleiades chakra healing, which comes from the Mexican tradition. So there's a lot of education that I need to give out, both on social medias, but also on the website. So I will need some case studies, blog stories, and testimonials.
Okay, thank you. And Lisa, can I ask you what's your background and what do you need help with stories for?
Well, I come from a background in advertising where storytelling was kind of part of the job. I
Yep.
do a lot of graphic recording now, as you see behind me. I work with people in innovation and R&D and product development, and a lot of them have trouble telling stories that will help them get buy-in from other members of the organization or from customers and things. So I'm hoping to help them learn to tell better stories about the work that they're doing so that they can get more people enrolled in their work.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Thank you. And Rowan.
Hi there, I'm Rowan, and I'm based in London, UK. And yeah, I'm really interested. I bought the Storyteller tactics because, like last week, I said that I'm interested in applying them to my social activities of being running better tabletop role-playing games such as Dungeons and Dragons, but also professionally. I'm now a qualified mental health and exercise coach, and with no clientele, and so starting out on a personal business with that. So it's all fully official, accredited course and a new thing, and also a new different tone into the fitness industry. So I'm looking to learn how to weave a better message about how finding a trustworthy coach to exercise with will change someone's mentality and attitude about themselves with exercising just for the sake of loving the mental health and the physical health benefits rather than all these superficial targets. So really putting a new spin on how things work in the fitness industry to something which is far more holistically positive and beneficial, and much more about boosting people's happiness with life and everything. Yeah. So gotta have a chat. So that's the main thing.
Okay, brilliant. So listen, what I'd like to do is to take a few minutes with each of you and to go through this. This is, as you've been talking, I've been kind of doing kind of my mental sifting through the cards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with Ursilia and talk about simple sales stories, because you're at the stage now where you're trying to build a website to get people into something that's partly new and partly well established. Lisa, in terms of talking to R&D engineers and people who are deeply involved in the process, I think there's something in Rolls-Royce Moment, the Rolls-Royce Moment card, which would be useful. And Rowan, I think I'd like to try looking through the Rags to Riches story, in particular, talking about how that might be useful for telling a different kind of fitness story to what you described as the more superficial. There's the more superficial version, which is pretty much the standard story of the fitness industry. So Ursula, I'm going to start with you with simple sales stories. So the card basically is one of the green cards in the deck, marked out as a functional card, because it's helping you do something right now. That is, tell stories that help you to win new customers. So on the card, it's basically saying, okay, you got to convince new customers to buy into your idea by telling them stories about existing customers. So the customers you've got are very, very useful to you. In fact, they're really valuable, not just because they give you money, but because they can give you stories. Now,
Mm.
there are two kinds of, well, basic on the back of the card. It says, well, there are two kinds of stories that you can use. Someone like you buys this product is
Mm-hmm.
the simplest and most effective sales story. So in order to get that story right, you need to have a fairly good idea of who it is you're talking to in the first place. So who's your target customer? So you might think, so for example, you might think, well, Reiki massage, who would you say would be a good target customer for the Reiki massage service, would you say?
Okay, Reiki is energy healing and massage is hands-on.
Okay.
So I know people say Reiki massage, but it's really they're just
Two different things. Okay,
aren't
my
even
apologies.
combined.
So
Okay,
for
so
Reiki therapy.
Reiki energy healing. So to me, the easiest would be any energy healers. Yeah.
So this is talking about people, your target customer here are not the receivers of the treatment, they're the therapists who give the treatment.
The therapists, yeah, that's
Okay.
right. So I'm teaching other therapists, so it's a newly accredited course. I'm the only one that teaches it.
Yep.
Because I created a framework, I had to bring in a technique from the Mexican tradition, but that I learned from indigenous healers. But I reframed it into a therapeutic framework so that you can accredit the course. So it's new to everybody, to other therapists as well as clients. So I have worked both with clients in one-to-one sessions that could possibly bring up their own stories. The problem with that is that they're private people, so they don't want to talk about their healing journeys, and so they don't want to be named or be on my website to talk about their own problems. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a problem with therapists, and the other people would be therapists. So right now I'm after other therapists to learn a new technique which will help them increase their revenue. It's a new solution to new problems that we have now. So yes, so I'm after other therapies, not so much one-to-ones.
So at the moment, where you are in your business right now, do you have any customers who are already therapists who you've trained in this new method, or are you at absolute the very beginning?
No. There is one. So far, I've only just accredited the course. So I taught it. People wanted to learn it,
Yes.
but one or two of them are actually qualified therapists, so they could maybe do the next level. Yeah, so the advanced level. So I taught it at, let's say, entry level. And I can take them to the advanced level so that they get
so your target customer is going to be other existing therapists using existing therapies who wish to add a new therapy to their range.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the customer you're aiming for. Imagine that person's standing here, and what you need to do is to tell a story of a customer who's as close to them, as similar to them as you possibly can. So this is where your existing customers who have been through the training with you are, the closer they are to your target customer, the more affinity there is, the more look, someone like you has already done this is going to be effective. So those small number of people who are your first cohort of people you've trained are super important. You really do need to get them on board with you, even to the point of, obviously some people make this into a financial incentive. You become what do they call affiliate marketing, or discount on, some sort of discounted. So somebody is going to give you a story, you're going to give them discount on their next level of training, something like that. Their story is so important to you that yes, it's really worth spending some, not just time, but also possibly spending some money. Make sure that that you get it. Okay, so this story has been basically, it's going to be a bit similar to the one that we'll talk about with Rowan in a moment about using rags to riches. So I won't repeat myself. I'll save that for Rowan. But essentially, the story you need to be able to tell, and you can tell it in 40 or 50 words, is about going from a problem to a solution, going from being unable to do something to able to do it. So it's that sort of very straightforward kind of, look, here's what I needed, now I've got it kind of story. As I say, we'll go into that in a little bit more detail with Rowan. But the other thing as well that I think is quite interesting. So that's that effectively the simple sales story. It is worth thinking about stories of actual customers, as in the people who you've practiced the therapy on.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that some of them will say, I don't want to share my details. I don't want to be my face or my name to be used. And that's completely understandable. In all kinds of walks of life, there are people who don't wish to be identified. Okay. So you've got an option there. One is to say, and I think people understand that with healthcare or any kind of therapeutic work, that people are private. So I think it's not a terrible thing. So what you can do is you can create a kind of like sort of composite story of okay, so I'm going to tell you a story about a customer. I'm going to change her name, but Jacinta came to me. She's 37 years old. She's gone through a very quite difficult childbirth within the last few weeks, and she's just physically finding it really hard to get back to where she wants to be. And so I suggested to her this form of therapy, and she had 3 sessions with me. And now she said, so you basically you create the story. Yeah.
So I write,
you change the name.
I write the case study. So it's like writing a case study yourself, so that you can track the progress.
Yeah. Now the obviously this is open to abuse because you could completely fabricate the whole thing.
Oh no.
Yeah. But that's where the reason why you don't fabricate it is because if we ever found out, we'd never trust you for anything ever again.
Of course, yeah. That's
yeah, absolutely right. So this is, but it's worth bearing in mind that that you as the storyteller have an ethical responsibility, and number one is to tell the truth. But you also have a responsibility to the people you're talking about not to betray their confidences.
Yeah,
so you could do both. You can tell the truth and not betray somebody's confidence by creating an anonymous character, but giving him or her some real depth. Give them a made-up name, and give them an age. Give them a reality, so we can really.
I just haven't asked permission, and I haven't asked her to write about it. But we have. I think I must still have the messaging in messages that she sent me. Oh my God, this happened and this happened, and I use this and I use that. So all of that conversation can be everything in her words.
Yes.
I just need to reconnect and ask if we can write it as a case study and publish it.
Absolutely right. And you may be surprised. You may find that that her reaction is, when you explain that you're trying to spread the word, right, and make this treatment available to other people, her reaction might be positive. She might say, yes, I will be a case study, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But what I think is important here with all of these case studies, whether it's customers who you've treated or therapists who you've trained, they're both customers. What's important here is you can't expect them to write their story for you. You have to. What you should do, and my advice is to people is, look, when you need customer stories, and we do need customer stories, you need to make time, have a chat, explain why you're having the chat, make lots of frantic notes while they're talking. Yeah, so you're scribbling or writing down, what they're saying about what they experienced with you, and then you say, right, thanks very much. I'm going to email you later today, tomorrow, whatever. I'm going to email you based on this conversation, a short quote, 30, 40 words, doesn't need to be any more than that. If you're happy with it, just say yes, and I'll put it on the website. And then it's up to you to write something that's pretty close to what they said. If you're not happy with it, I'll change it. Yeah. So, but you can't expect them to write it for you because they're busy, and it's your homework, not theirs.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's that. But the simple sales story template for you would be really useful because you're basically saying, okay, here's somebody like you, they've already benefited from this. Okay, now in terms of what to go in a bit more depth into what sort of story you could be telling here, then this also involves Rowan now in terms of mental fitness coach. How do you describe it, Rowan? Do you call it mental fitness coaching, mental health coaching?
Mental health and exercise coaching, yeah.
Mental health and exercise coaching. Okay. Mental
So,
health and exercise coaching. Good. Okay. So the story here, I think, this is what will contrast nicely. There's a sort of, it's rags to riches. And this, I think, is going to contrast quite nicely with there's a superficial version of a fitness story, which let's do that first, right? And it is basically the superficial version is you work with a coach because you want to look good, you want to be beach body ready, you want to have a six pack, and you come to the gym. So if you look at most of the marketing material and advertising material for mainstream fitness coaches and gyms, it is about, it's got muscles and sweat and kind of athletic achievement and, generally speaking, beautiful people. So it's kind of very superficial. So you're also trying to, but what they're doing is actually as a kind of, look, you've got a problem. You're down here. You want to be up here, right? Which is the story arc of rags to riches, is going from a bad place to a good place. However, here's why I think what you're doing is different, and I think this also applies, Ercilia, this also applies to the work that you're doing as well, is that what you're looking at is what's inside, not what's superficial. And so when you look at the rags to riches story arc, I mean, you can express it very simply as saying you go from a bad place to a good place. You've got a problem, we've got a solution. And that's a very, very simple way. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's a very simple way of expressing it. But in the rags to riches story, when you go a little bit deeper, it's actually about recognition. So it's about, there's something inside that matters, but it's overlooked. And by the end of that story, that important thing inside the character is recognized. And recognition is incredibly rewarding to us all. And so the rags to riches story, even though it's called rags to riches, is not about money, and it's certainly not about superficial gain of any kind. It's not about a six pack. It's not about money. It's not about popularity. It's not about any of those things or fame. It's about what's inside. So the obvious rags to riches story is the Cinderella story, but equally, pretty much any story of coming of age that you can think of is effectively a rags to riches story, because in those stories, what's happening is we meet the character when they are either because of age or whatever, life stage, ill health, anything, they are feeling down, they're feeling overlooked, there's something in them of great value. There's something in all of us of great value. Okay, but we often feel overlooked, and this basically dates back to our childhood. Okay, so what you're then offering them is a chance to not just sort of achieve something external, but for what's good about them to be recognized by other people. And the first person who's going to recognize it is probably you, in Rowan's case, as the coach. You're going to recognize, but also the people around them. So I think the rags to riches story is a really powerful one, and you can kind of turn it into like a 3-stage story. In the beginning, the hero's in a bad place, but there's something valuable and good inside them. The middle is where you come in. You in this story, you become the fairy godmother, but what's interesting about it is the fairy godmother has a role, but is not the solution. So if you think about Cinderella, the fairy godmother gives her the wherewithal to go to the ball and meet the prince, but she doesn't make the prince fall in love. If the fairy godmother can do magic, why doesn't she just go boom like that and Cinderella gets married? Right. Equally in the Harry Potter stories, Dumbledore is a magical figure. Why doesn't he just do that and Harry's a wizard? Well, it doesn't work like that. If there's so in other words, if you hand all of the successes to the person, they're not really their successes. So you're going to help them. You're going to help them get started, but ultimately they're going to get there by themselves. Otherwise, if they don't, then they're still back where really, truly, they're still back here somewhere. So when you think of yourself as fairy godmother in this case, you think, okay, I'm going to get them started on their journey, but they will make it to the end by themselves because that's how they'll get stronger. And that's how, and when they're stronger, they'll be recognized as something that matters to them, a fighter, a carer, whatever it is that matters to them. And your role is to set them on the way, support them along the way, but ultimately they will make those steps themselves. So I think that's that is
empowering. It's a more empowering way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you can see then the difference between that and the kind of quick win investment story, or the gym story, or the diet supplement story. Just take these tablets and you will get fitter, slimmer, richer, whatever it is. Those are all quick wins, right? And we'd love them to be true, but they're not. We know from experience they're not, because if they were true, we'd all be walking around with six packs, and we'd all be walking around with bitcoins, and we'd all be walking around with with all these things. But it's not true, so we don't. Okay. This is a very common recurring story. As Lisa was saying, it's the ugly duckling, it's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, it's it's Harry Potter, you name it. This story comes again and again and again, and therefore we're primed and ready for it, right? Therefore, you don't need to do much to get us into this story. So all you need to do really is follow the beats on the card. Okay, the hero is in a bad place, but there's something there. They want to be better. They want to be fitter. They want to be happier. They want their families to, they want to have a better relationship with their friends or their family or whatever it is. There's something inside that's driving them up. They're looking up for a good reason. Okay, that's the beginning. The middle is, okay, you get involved and you do this and this and this and this together. And the end is, well, actually now look at her. She's doing this by herself, because all along she was these things, and now everyone can see it. What's the other thing as well that's interesting about, so that story arc is there on the page. What is also interesting about story, so I was saying to Ursilia before, it's legitimate to create a composite story based on reality to protect somebody's identity. That's absolutely fine. It has to have the same ingredients. In other words, it has to have a character. That person has to be, have a name and an age and a life story that you can sum up in a couple of sentences. Yeah, you can't. If you just talk about customers and just describe them as customers, well, we can't see anything when you talk about customers. Okay, so just as it's okay to create a fictional case study based on reality, okay, so long as you're signaling to people, that's what you're doing. So you signal to people by saying, I'm going to talk to you about a customer. I've changed her name because this is personal stuff, but she's real. Okay, that's fine. Now you can do it. But similarly, if you're thinking, so Rowan, you might be thinking, well, I haven't got that customer yet who's done that full transition from needing my help to getting my help to doing it without me. I haven't got her yet. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw this story into the future. And I'm going to say, so in storytelling terms, roughly speaking, if you'd say to me, okay, this is the kind of work I do. For example, to me indicates you're about to tell me a factual story about something that's actually happened. Okay, that's what I assume. But equally, you could say, just imagine. And just imagine is indicating that this hasn't happened, but it could. So just imagine is the cue for a plausible future scenario story, and you have to make it plausible. So, like I said to people, you can't say, just imagine we all win the lottery tomorrow, and and then we win it the day after, and we win it the day after that, and all our problems are over. Well, that's not going to happen. It's not plausible. Okay, so you can hold out the hope of a rags to riches story, even if it hasn't happened yet, as long as you're clear that that's what you're doing. Yeah, as long as you're clear that this is something you think can happen. It's but also the great thing about just imagine stories is you can flip the pronoun from third person to second person. So rather than saying, for example, there's this woman I worked with last week called Lisa, and she, blah blah blah. Okay, you can then go, just imagine you came to me and you've been off work for 6 weeks with, pretty bad anxiety. Okay, so what you're now doing is you're doing a plausible scenario story with me as the hero. And it's really hard for people to refuse to listen to that. Right? Especially if, again, the story you're telling is close to where they actually are truly at the moment. Right? We've got an incredible empathetic potential, most of us anyway, where if you say to, we see it in children, imagine you're a dinosaur, and straight away they are a dinosaur, right? But actually with adults as well, we've got a remarkable capacity to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and imagine that we are whatever you tell us. And it's very powerful. So again, so long as it's kind of relevant to the person you're trying to talk to, then you can lead them on an imaginary journey, which actually has them as the imaginary subject. In fact, you can do it even across, it doesn't have to be even that close to them. We're very good at empathizing with people who are nothing like us. Now, if you think about Disney and Pixar, if you watched Finding Nemo and you were happy when Nemo was found by his dad, then you were empathetically connected to a fish. So we have an incredible capacity to connect with people through stories. Okay, so I think both to Ursula and to Rowan, that rags to riches version of a fitness and wellness story, which is not superficial, has got some real potential. Okay. Now, Lisa, you were talking about R&D engineers. Are they engineers?
People in innovation also, but it's they often overlap.
Okay. So people working in innovation. So there's two things that occurred to me that might be really useful. One that they're probably already familiar with, which takes a bit of explaining, is the innovation curve. The idea of where are people? We'll come on to that in a second. The other one that kind of I think is a really good story for good story card for engineers, particularly because it comes from an engineering place. This story is the card Rolls-Royce moment. She has it already.
Got it right.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this? Okay, so my dad told me this story about Rolls-Royce when I was about 10 years old, and already that story was 20 years old. And the story was that when you're driving at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise inside the Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock. Mm-hmm. You go, wow, okay, that's So my dad remembered it 20 years later. You tell it to people now, this is 60 years after this advert ran, people go, oh, yeah, I get it. Right. Okay. They instantly get it. So it's got to be one of the most successful adverts ever written. Okay. Why does it work so well? Well, because it's vivid. It puts you straight into a moment, one moment. Right. That fact about the sound of the clock came from an engineer's report with thousands and thousands and thousands of paragraphs of text. So somewhere down the line, an engineer had discovered that, and he added it to the engineer's report. And then it's just sat there until an advertiser, David Ogilvy, read the report and went, that's it, that's the line, and drew it out. So it's vivid, it's relatable, it's exemplary is the reason one that says on the cards why that particular line works. So I think you could share that with innovators of any kind, right? And say, look, here's a great example of how basically an engineer spotted something and buried it in a report, right? And another pair of eyes came in, a fresh pair of eyes, and went, wow. Yeah, and turned it into one of the most successful adverts ever written.
Mm.
So
I'm really familiar with that because, you know, I was in advertising for 25 years and I started in the early 1980s. So David Ogilvy is, you know, patron saint of advertising. And plus that's one of his most famous stories, not the only one.
Yep.
But what I like about this, because what I'd like to be able to do, even though I know that storyteller tactics is not the same as workshop tactics, what I'd like to be able to do is to go into, and I haven't done this yet. So the thing you just said, oh, imagine if I came into your organization, I helped your engineers and your innovation people tell the stories like this one, you know, I could do that given my background and everything like that, even though I haven't done it yet. I'd like to be able to run workshops where this might be one of the exercises, like, you know, out of all the things that you know about the product that you're developing, if you had to think of something that could be like that, what would it be? And maybe they're not even thinking about it yet. It's like, well, actually, this little detail over here could be important, or that little detail over there could be important. And like what it says on the back of the card, it's exemplary. Like what small, easy to understand detail about your product or your idea is something that kind of symbolizes the entire thing, or could. Or maybe you could even add a feature that it doesn't already exist that we could then build a story like this around, you know, and have it be a thought experiment and see what they come up with. And then right away, even if we don't end up with just one, like the electric clock, if they ended up with 2 or 3 specific things that this thing does, that could be the basis for presentation or from sales copy or something like that. I think it could be super,
right. And it has to be, I mean, you can, when I say vivid, I think you could say, okay, so a vivid moment, something we can hear, see, taste, smell, or feel. So you've got 5 senses. And so it's something, if you can describe how it impacts you in one of those 5 ways, then again, it's those kind of mirror neurons in the brain are firing. You describe the sound of something, I hear it in my head. You describe the smell of something, yep, I smell it in my head. So that's the sensory side of, okay, but also it has to be one moment. There's a place for data, right? And there's a place for the overarching, the big picture, but there's a real place for the single moment. Yeah, the single moment that stands out. There's a little test that I sometimes do with when I'm sort of working with clients for the first time, and I kind of dig into their website copy usually and find some terrible piece of business writing, some really clunky piece of text, and I say, right, here's how you know this is bad writing. Certainly not storytelling anyway. Imagine the phone rings tonight, right, and it's your mum on the phone, and she says, "Hey, how's your day, love?" And you go, "Oh, fantastic day." And she says, "Oh, what happened?" And then you read out the line of text off the website, right, which is, "Oh, well, we sharpened employee perspective and empowered some forward thinking, right? And it's just like, you'd never do that in a million years. So it's that thing of, from the engineer's point of view, of when they, or the innovators, when it's their mom on the phone, or when they're sitting around, talking to each other, and they go, hey, you never guess what, right? And they've noticed something. So the card that's kind of closest to that, I think, at the moment, is one of the concept cards, or maybe an explore card called "That's Funny," and it's this idea that the idea that stuff hits your kind of your antenna of like, oh, that's funny. You didn't expect that. Maybe it's an explore card. Hold on a second. Yeah, it's one of the orange cards, explore. And it's this idea that things strike us as funny, peculiar, or funny, haha, when they're not what we expected. And so sometimes that's an indicator of a mistake, or it's an indicator of old models breaking down. But also it's like a sort of, look, if it got your attention, it might get ours.
Mhm.
If it made you go, oh, yep, that's the thing of going in there and thinking, okay, so that's funny, curious tales, secrets and puzzles. All of these are about sort of tuning your antenna, or an emotional dashboard as well, are all about kind of tuning your antenna, and like, well, you're already alert to these things. We all are in whatever field we work in. We're super alert to things that don't fit, or things that are new, or things that surprise us. We're really tuned into them. But what we tend to do is just kind of internalize it into our own kind of, oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, well, I've learned something now, and move on. But those are the moments when you can turn into little story moments.
Yeah, I'm a cartoonist, so I this is speaking to me very much. Like, I do single panel cartoons, which sometimes appear in New Yorker, and that's exactly what this is. It's a moment, and it's a story in one picture, and sometimes it's a word game.
Yep.
But sometimes it's just a universal kind of thing that everybody can kind of understand why it's funny, and that kind of helps with the culture also. Like, if you have the humor, that everybody, this kind of puts you in kind of a more of a observer perspective, when everybody's laughing about the same the same absurdity or the same whatever. So I've been trying to articulate that. What you just said is really good.
There's another thing, there's one of the sort of go-to cards really in the deck is movie time. So this, again, to everybody really, when you need to tell a story about anything, then the movie time card is a really good place to go, because it makes you say, okay, we start with the action. So whatever it is you're trying to explain, it has to be something happening in a real place, or something happening in a place and time to a person. So because that's what movie directors shout. They shout action. They don't shout concept or strategy. They shout action. So that's first ingredient. Second ingredient being emotion. Okay, there's a really interesting test. So I used to be a television journalist, and before they let me loose with a camera, I was a researcher for a long time. And so my job was to come up with ideas for stories, which the editors would then decide whether to commission the idea and turn it into a television story. And back at the beginning of my career, when I didn't know very much about television, I'd keep coming up with, and I was a politics graduate. I thought the world needed to know my opinion on politics, but I would come up with these ideas for sort of, political stories, or big social issue stories, and the editor would go, okay, what are you going to point a camera at? So you want to do a story about inequality. What are you going to point a camera at? Oh, society. Well, how do you point a camera at society? You can't. So you're going to have to find. Yeah. Similar thing for a cartoonist. What are you going to point your pen at?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so movie time Yeah.
It forces a story.
Forces you to think. Or, well, similarly, Rolls-Royce moment. Yeah. It's like, okay, take me to a single moment in time. And that, and then we'll learn the lesson from it. But the crucial thing is, when you take me to a single moment in time, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
And that's the really crucial bit. And if it has, and that's the absolute bottom level basic ingredient of story, which if you don't have that, you're not telling stories. Then you've got the added ingredients of, okay, this means something because it's emotional, there's an emotion involved, or it's funny, and funny means basically I went in expecting one thing and I got something completely different. And yeah. So all of these things add drama to the story. So a story is action and emotion with meaning, okay, but a good story has drama too. And so that means going from a bad place to a good place. It means going from being overlooked to being recognized. That's dramatic. It involves it involves discovering something that makes you take a step backwards. So all of these things, so basically stories are they're not just about real things, about things happening in a frame that you can point a camera at, but it's also, you're looking for drama. You're looking for, I'm telling you this story because something changed. As a result of what happened, I came away and went, right, well, we got to do this differently.
Right. I love the pointing the camera. It's a little bit like National Geographic photographs that are so famous and whatever. You see a mother and a baby, and it tells the whole story of famine in some country by seeing that one picture. Right.
There's also something really interesting about photographs. And I don't know, Lisa, which part of the States are you from?
I'm from New York City, but I live in California.
Okay, so you probably have local newspapers. I don't know if they still even survive, but there's a kind of there's a tradition in local newspapers where a photographer will turn up at at the story, and basically you've got these kind of pictures of people holding plaques or shaking hands. Yeah. They're all standing in a row, or they're sitting in front of a building, or whatever it is. That kind of that's the story. Well, it's not. And the reason why you can tell that's not a good story in visual terms is a really good photograph is somewhere on the beginning, middle end of a story. So a really good photograph is like a snapshot, and you can say, okay, how did we get here, and what happens next? And a really good photograph, you want to know those two things. How on earth did we get here? What on earth is going to happen next? Whereas the posed photographs of usually middle-aged men in suits shaking hands, right? How did we get here? Well, the photographer told us to stand here.
Yeah, that's not very interesting.
What's going to happen next? Well, we're all going to go back to what we were doing before. So it's like that's why it's visually dead. It's not telling a story. Whereas great photojournalism, great photo storytelling it's like a frame of a movie where something happened to get us here, and something's going to happen after. So too, a good cartoonist. Gary Larson, is it Larson?
Yeah, Larson, who did Far Side. Yeah,
Far Side. One of my all-time favorite cartoons shows a guy who's just walked into a lift, right? And the lift is full of people, and he's brought a lion with him into the lift. And the speech caption says, "Don't worry, he's quite tame unless he's startled by something," right? And the lift doors are closing, and you can see the lion's tail is sticking out of the lift.
Sticking out,
But the lift doors are like that, yeah. And the lift is full of people, and it's just that thing of, with Larson cartoons, something's about to happen.
Disaster's about to strike. Yeah.
Great. Disaster's about to strike, and it's just absolutely brilliant. So story is basically stuff changes.
This is very helpful. I know we're getting close to the hour, so another time though, I'd love to hear you talk more, or maybe there are some articles or in the vault or something like that about how to conduct a kind of an engagement based on some of this stuff. Like I'd love to be able to come in to a company with some of these cards and
Yep.
say, okay, work on this now together. I mean, I could do it for them,
Yep.
but it'd be
Get
better
them
if
to do
they,
it.
yeah, or at least
Yeah,
have them and then we could take the best of the best and turn it into something
yeah.
afterward. See?
I mean, I think if companies are really right, here's the interesting thing. Everyone tells stories all the time anyway, right? Everyone tells stories. Anyone who tells you they don't tell stories, they're lying. Sometimes it's called gossip. Yeah. Sometimes it's back chat. Doesn't matter. Everyone tells stories. They just don't do it in meetings.
Mhm.
Right? When they get, or they don't do it in emails. When they get into the meeting or the email or the formal, they sit down, they start just writing in business speak. So you can pretty much guarantee every workplace is full of stories, and people are telling them all the time. So the key thing is how do you show that you want to hear the stories? How do you find those stories, and how do you share them in a workplace? I'll give you a last example before we hit time. So I worked with an American company in the UK who had an American parent company, and I was talking, and they were a coaching organization who coached business leaders, and I was talking to them about the value of business storytelling. And I got to the end of the session, and the boss of the UK company said, "Well, in America, in our parent company, they have a monthly meeting for all the managers, and they all start. Everyone has to bring in a customer story to that meeting. So they start the meeting where they just go around and everybody tells a customer story, and every month there has to be a new story." And I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Do you do that here?" And she went, "No, it sounds too American." But the interesting thing was, if you think about that in a cultural setting, a company setting, if you actually say, right, formally in a meeting setting now, we're going to start with everyone has to have a customer story. Well, the first thing that happens is everyone goes away and goes, "Oh shit, I need to find a story." Right, they then start asking their colleagues, "Do you know a good customer story?" And if that happens month after month after month, well, first two things happen. You start building up a bank of stories, which if you're clever and you write them down, you build up a story bank. Second thing that happens is everyone in the organization realize. So, for example, you say, "I want a story about customer service." Either a good example or somewhere where we fucked up, but we put it right. Don't matter, one of the two. If the bosses start asking all of their people who work for them, "Can you give me another story? I need another story for the meeting. I'm going to see the big boss. I need a story." Yeah. That sends out a very powerful message. That
and it also helps people understand what a story is and what a story isn't, and how to make it because of muscle. I know we got to go, but this you remind me of a situation. I was working with a group of engineers. I was teaching them how to draw, draw ideas, how to sketch. But they had their own presentations while they were going on, and the different people were making different presentations. It was during COVID, so it was all virtual.
Yep.
And they had a repeating segment called "Why Things Fail."
Okay.
And the company makes water heaters and air conditioning units and things. And so these people told these amazing and sometimes very funny stories about when their water heaters broke down or something and there was one where the water heater burst and the water came out, and the place where that happened was located above a shop that sold bridal dresses. And all these bridal dresses, and it was a huge disaster, and they had to replace all these dresses. But because of the emotional aspect of it wasn't like it ruined a bunch of widgets. It was wedding dress. I remember it's 2 or 3 years ago, and then they said, well, because of that, we developed this feature that stops the leaking from something like that, and it makes so much more sense. And I'm not an engineer, but it was but I was proud of them for doing a series of why things fail and what we did about it. And they were all stories.
Absolutely right.
So really good.
And they all follow similar kind of arc, which is the man in a hole story of we think we're doing the right thing, it fails, we put it right.
Yep.
And that's the simplest, most effective, one of the most effective stories your company can ever tell. And it's amazing how many companies don't tell them because they don't like talking about the fail bit. They think if they talk about the fail bit, that's going to damage their reputation. So
the best reviews on, we have a thing called, do you have Yelp in where you are? Yelp. It's a
Yes.
review. Yeah.
Yeah.
The best reviews are the bad ones where the company came back and said, we're so sorry this happened to you. What can we do? And then the person comes back, the reviewer comes back and said, I'm a fan now. They came back and they made it right and they did this and they did that. And now they're going out and telling their friends how great it was.
Yeah.
So
absolutely right.
Better than you know, in the first place. So
absolutely right. This is part of the reason why we do these sessions here. So people come and they bought the cards. They have questions that the cards haven't answered, right? And so we try and answer the questions, and hopefully you go away feeling inspired and happy.
I'm happy.
Which is a great note to end the recording. I'm just going to pause the recording now, folks. Thank you all very much.